So welcome everyone. I'm Dr. Liz Rutledge, Director of Wildlife Resources at the North Carolina Wildlife Federation. Thank you for attending tonight's webinar, which is part of the 15 webinar series, Learn to Deer Hunt. This series offers a dynamic lineup of presentations and materials curated by the New Hill Hunter Education and Mentoring Program, covering a wide variety of topics to guide new deer hunters from preseason scouting to processing. The series is hosted and moderated by the North Carolina Wildlife Federation in conjunction with its South Wake Conservationist chapter. General housekeeping, we ask that everyone stay muted throughout the webinar until we have the Q&A session at the end. Also, this webinar is being recorded for future use, so please turn your camera off if you do not want to be seen on the video recording. We ask that you either put any questions you have in the chat box during the presentation, which will be read during the Q&A session, or you may raise your hand to be called on during the Q&A session. To raise your hand, use the hand sign in the top right corner of your screen. All right, so a couple minutes to provide you with some background information on the North Carolina Wildlife Federation programming related to R3, which is retention, recruitment, and reactivation. Academics afield, the North Carolina Wildlife Federation has partnered with NC State, the Wildlife Resources Commission, Wake County Wildlife Club, and other conservation groups to build upon current R3 programming and introduce college students from non-traditional backgrounds to hunting and shooting sports. Getting Started Outdoors is a partnership between the Wildlife Federation and the Wildlife Resources Commission to provide an all-day educational workshop and one-on-one deer hunting mentoring opportunities for participants. For those interested in wildlife and conservation policy issues, the Wildlife Federation has the CAMO Coalition, which is a listserv to keep members up to date on policy, specifically geared towards hunters and anglers. Artemis is a program of the National Wildlife Federation that the North Carolina Wildlife Federation promotes to uplift women in sporting and conservation and to provide small group hunting and mentoring opportunities for females. The North Carolina Wildlife Federation is proud to host this webinar series in conjunction with the New Hill Hunter Education and Mentoring Program and additional partners who are contributing the educational content for the webinars we're able to bring to you. In addition, North Carolina Wildlife Federation volunteers Guy and Judy Gardner partner with the Wildlife Resources Commission to provide skills-based seminars consisting of Deer Hunting 101 and From Field to Freezer Deer Processing. These are open to the public and they will be held virtually this year, and that will occur in September. So we hope you're able to register and join us. The North Carolina Wildlife Federation also works directly with Carolina Hunters for the Hungry to facilitate the donation of hunter-harvested deer to feed the hungry across the state. This series was curated by the New Hill Hunter Education and Mentoring Program and facilitating partners listed on the slide. The webinars are for adults new to deer hunting and include practical topics to explore the ins and outs of hunting and to enhance your overall outdoor experience. Please see the New Hill Hunter Education and Mentoring Program Facebook page for more information on field opportunities. So I'm happy to introduce our guest speaker, Pat O'Donnell, for this evening. He's from the New Hill Hunter Education and Mentoring Program. Pat has been a passionate sportsman, mentor, and wildlife educator in North Carolina for many years. An avid archer and trapper, Pat has actively sought every opportunity to engage others in the outdoors and hunting sports. Beyond common big and small game species and methods, Pat enjoys hunting alligator and bow fishing. He traps for both pelts and to support wildlife remediation efforts. As an active member of the North Carolina Bowhunters Association, he is certified to support both depredation and urban deer management initiatives. Pat is also an accomplished dog trainer. As an active mentor serving the New Hill Hunter Education and Mentoring Program, Pat is credited with launching the hunting careers of dozens of new hunters. So we're extremely happy to have Pat with us tonight, and so I will go ahead and turn it over to him to get the presentation started.
Thank you, Liz. And since I got my full screen presentation, so if there's any questions, can you just make sure you let me know what they are? Okay. All right. So this presentation is freezer to table. This is my favorite presentation to give because it involves food and lots of food. So most of these pictures, there's tons of pictures here, and they're mostly pictures I had already probably taken, because I'm always taking pictures and sending them to my brothers to show them what I'm eating that night and whatnot. So, so the general idea of this presentation is going to be give you guys an idea of what to do with the deer. So you've been successful, you've gone through your hunt, you did your scouting, you got your deer, you process your deer. Now you got a bunch of meat in the freezer. So now what are you going to do? We're going to eat that meat. So I'm going to go through just some different options and other things, techniques, tools, and a different array of details that should find helpful. So the general options, there's a list here, and they're kind of not mutually exclusive, but some basic things you can do. You got a big chunk of venison, so you just carve a steak out of it, throw it on the grill. There you go. You can grind it. There's a bunch of stuff you can do with it ground. You can make some burgers, or if you want to take a big chunk of meat, big part of the ham or shoulder, you can cook the whole thing as a roast. Also sausage. There's an array of different types of sausages you can make. And also you can use a smoker. Smokers are becoming pretty popular. Good tool to add. If you haven't gotten one, put it on the list, see what happens. All right, so let's start going through these and see where it takes us. But first, there's a set of tools that I'm going to talk about, and you don't necessarily need all of these. So in the parentheses, if there's an optional alternative, I've tried to put them, but some of them don't have alternatives. But let's go through. The thermometer is probably the simplest and probably most useful tool you'll need cooking venison. Venison is a low-fat meat. And it will dry out super quick if you cook it too long. So that's where the thermometer comes in. You want to be cooking that thing rare, medium rare, and that's about it. So the thermometer, if you want to get 130 or whatever, you'll figure out what your temperature is for your little steak or whatnot. But do not overcook venison, please. When you're grilling it or making it like burgers or something, it'll just dry out. Of course, you need knives and cutting boards. Everybody should have those. Just in your knives, please make sure your knives are sharp. There's more types of knives than you can imagine, but I take any sharp knife over 20 dull knives, right? Anything, just as long as it's sharp, it'll cut. A vacuum sealer is a very, very useful tool. They're very efficient at keeping meat. I freeze almost all the meat at some point usually. And so the freezer is always stacked full of stuff, and I eat a ton of meat. I shoot a lot of deer. I shoot a lot of other stuff. I trap beaver, fish, everything we got in the freezer. If you vacuum seal it and you get a good vacuum seal on it, I've pulled stuff out that it was kind of hidden. It fell behind some other stuff, and my freezer, I have like the food sides on the left. All the further right you go, the less the non-food. You might find some critters or whole critters or furs or whatnot. But sometimes a piece of, freezer wrap in there or whatever, vacuum sealed meat gets dropped, all in there. I'll pull something out. It'll be 2 years old, and I'll cook it up. It'll be just fine. And if otherwise, if you're using freezer wrap as an option, it'll work, but not as well. Just not as well. We'll talk about grinders. Grinders, I don't think it's a real alternative. The grinders, grinder is a very useful tool. We'll get into that. A dehydrator is good. There's different versions of them. If you don't have a dehydrator, you can use your oven, you can use your smoker, you can use your grill. There's all different ways to dehydrate meat, particularly jerky is what I'm thinking of, without a dehydrator. A slicer, electric slicer is a real nice tool. Getting uniform slices if you're particularly for jerky. But if you don't have that, manual, you can just use your just eyeball, using your hand. They also make jerky boards. A different way to cut slices off a slab of meat. Again, we talked about the smokers become popular. If you don't have a smoker, you can kind of pseudo create a smoker just with your grill, your barbecue grill. You can create zones for smoke and heat and low heat, high heat, that sort of thing. A burger press is another very useful thing. I've been on like a 3-year burger binge. I just can't get enough burgers. That's big for me. We'll talk about that. And Crockpot is another tool if you have a Crockpot or a pressure cooker thing. If not, of course, the oven. You can just bake stuff. You can make pot roast and just an oven pan, whatnot. Another simple tool is scale. Right, when you get into grinding and stuff, it's good to know the weights, or if you're just cutting steaks, it's good to know how heavy things are so you can plan and make some packaging decisions and things like that. So okay, where to start? So the general assumption I'm going to make, and it may not always be true, is that you're pulling stuff out of the freezer. So when I process my deer, I'll end up with usually freezing most of it pretty quick. So when I get off, when I get all the meat off the deer, I got back straps. I got 2 back straps, 2 tenderloins, 2 shoulders, and 2 hams. And the back straps are probably my favorite of that mix. So I'll cut those into serving size. I won't do any cleaning of them, but I'll just usually about a pound is my backstrap portion for myself. I'll cut a pound of backstrap, vacuum seal it, pop it in the freezer. I don't do any trimming. I'll trim it afterwards. And then typically I'm going to package up the hams, the whole hams, or if they're big, they don't package well. I'll cut them in half, and I'll freeze the half a ham packages, and then and the shoulder too. Sometimes I will go ahead make some steak. If I don't feel like it, if it's the first deer of the season, freezer's empty, I might take 1 ham, make steaks, and then take a shoulder and grind it, or 2 shoulders, grind them for burgers. So. But generally you're going to be pulling stuff out of the freezer. And so what you want to do is partially thawed, don't completely thaw it. Cause you want to, if it's pseudo thawed, it's soft enough to cut, but still retains its firmness. So it's not really soft. So when you try to cut a soft piece of meat, the meat just gives and stuff. So, but it's pseudo frozen, it makes it a lot easier to trim. So here's a picture. One of those, I think these are half a ham, and they're the mirror sides from two sides of the deer. And the one side I trimmed up already, and the other side on the right is how it came out of the freezer package. Just showing you that. So, and I'll trim the stuff on the outside, and then you got some options there. Then you're gonna have to cut it up, and you're gonna have to decide, what you want to do with it. Let me see, little notes. Yeah, I covered that. Okay, so here, on the top left are both those hams that I finished trimming up the top and bottoms on them. And so what I did is I decided I was going to separate the meat, the muscles of this ham. And you can see on the bottom picture is the biggest muscle. I think that's the sirloin muscle of those hams. And then on the upper right, you can see the other pieces, the smaller pieces of that ham, or half a ham. The smaller pieces will probably end up going towards the old grind pile, and that bottom piece, well, I end up making steaks out of it. But at that point, that'd be a good roast piece if you want to do a roast, or you can slice it into steaks. And let me see, yeah. Steaks, sliced for jerky. Okay, yeah, you can. So So there. So on top left, you can see that is that very piece of muscle. Now I sliced it up into steak slices, little steak, 1-inch steak chunks. And so then I can package, I'd probably put like 2 of those in a package for myself for a single serving stuff. And that piece on the end, that I didn't cut, that you could make that its own steak. It's not as uniform in shape as those others, but it could work, or it might end up in the grind pile. I'm not sure where that one ended up. Another thing you can do is in the packages on the right, you may not be able to see it real well. What I did, I took ham and I cross cut it. So if you look in the bottom left, you can see that there's a big chunk of ham on the right there, and I had carved off slices off of that thing. So there you're cutting across muscle groups. That is actually a big chunk of bear ham on the bottom left. So you won't see venison steaks quite so large. But on the top right, you see those are deer steaks, where there was a small ham and I cross cut the whole ham into steaks. So the F, I don't know if you can see the package, those are F steaks, what I call F steaks. And the F stands for fawn. So I do hunt on a couple properties under DMAT program. So we're in there to reduce the herd size. So we're there to shoot does, and we're liberal on shooting, fawns as well. Any antlerless deer, we're just in there reducing the herd size. So if I'm shooting fawns, I try to wait to the end of the season where they're heavier, but that is some really good meat. I know some people they're long past their spot phase, but that is some really good tender steaks, and I had one of those tonight, so I'm very, very happy about those. So, and on the bottom right, you'll see a sliced up chunk of backstrap there. So on those, typically I would cook those whole and then slice it just like you saw it there. You can also slice them and then cook them as well. They're just get a little smaller medallion steaks. Depends on what sort of recipe you're going with. So, okay. See if I covered everything. Yeah. So generally, any sort of meat, the more uniform you could make the slices, it just cooks better, right? They cook evenly. So if you're making burgers or steaks or jerky, they just cook better if they're uniform length, width, height, whatever. And we talk about packaging. So you just when you go to package stuff, just think about serving sizes. You don't want stuff in more than you need. So I tend to do individual serving sizes. I package a lot of small packages, but it just makes it easy. If I need 1 serving, I got it. I need 2, I just get 2 out. Okay, so past the steaks, now we're going to go to the grinder stuff. So here's my collection of grinders. The little ones I inherited. The bottom left one I got from my mom, who inherited it from my grandmother. It's a vintage 1970 Grind-O-Matic. It works, but it's just slow. So, and the other little one in the front is about the same. It's just a newer model. I got that from my mother-in-law. So, they work. And if you only got to grind up 1 deer, plenty. It is slow, but it works. And I also had this adapter onto this big Cuisinart. That is a stronger motor. It worked a little bit better. But the unit, the attachment part is plastic, and it didn't hold up when I tried to grind that big bear meat. So then I went to the big one in the back, and that is probably overkill. It's a 1 horsepower motor. It's a beast. It's the Cabela's version. It just whatever you throw in there just grinds up and spits out. It'd probably grind up my arm if I stuck it in there. So really useful. And you don't have to trim things as much. It just, you pop it in there and it's ground. So so let me see. Yeah, as far as I don't, there's not a real good alternative to grinding. And so I would say, if you had to buy anything, the grinder or the vacuum sealer would be the two things on top of my list. And of course, you can grind for burgers, meatloafs, tacos, meat sauces, jerky, anything, all kinds of stuff. And they come with different grinding plates. That's the little, it has a bunch of holes on it, and, coming out the grinder. And that's a preference. My burgers, I kind of like a thicker grind. When I'm going to grind for sausage, I'll use, smaller ones. It'll make it a little tighter of a sausage and things. And foot pedal. Particularly when you get into like the sausage making, the foot pedal is really nice. So you can start and stop the grinder without using your hands, because your hands are usually messing with meat and stuff, and it's good to have another. It's like having another set of hands to turn things on and off. So it's nice. Burgers, like I said, I've been on a 3-year binge of burgers. So generally, you cut up some little whatever you want to grind up, cut it into little pieces depending on the grinder. Like if you have one of the small ones, I found the little thinner strips works better. They feed into and they kind of get pulled in. There's a little auger down in there, and they kind of get pulled into that, and so it doesn't clog that neck as easily. And then of course the bigger one, any size chunk works. So for burgers, you're probably going to want to add some fat. It'll make them more juicy. You can use beef fat. You can use pork fat. I've been using bacon lately, just because it's really easy, convenient to get. I have trouble finding. I'll go, different places I shop and see if they have beef fat, and they usually don't. So I'll just get some bacon. Nothing wrong with bacon. So you just have to have a ratio. My ratio I've been using is like 4 or 5 venison to 1 part bacon. As more I eat, the less bacon I would use, or fat, or whatever I'm using as my fat alternative there. So again, I have a scale. I have this little digital scale, which is nice. So I got 2.5 pounds of venison in that bowl, and I'm going to guess that these little bowls of bacon are 1/2 pound. So that's a 5-to-1 ratio. Then you see the picture of it ground up. It's a nice little mix of, enough fat in there. Looks good. Then I got my old little burger press. And then you'll see I'm throwing those burgers on a cookie sheet. You might be asking, why would you put your burgers on a cookie sheet? Because you're going to need to freeze those bad boys before you vacuum seal them. Because if you don't freeze them first, what happens is they just squash out pancakes. So your nice little uniform patty just goes, flattens out. So I did that once, just once. So now I freeze them. Once they're frozen enough, then I'll vacuum seal them, pop them in the freezer. And another thing about the vacuum sealing is it makes it real convenient to pop it in a sink of water to do a quick defrost. I'm a really bad planner. So just about every night around 5 o'clock, me and my wife have the same discussion, like what we're going to have for dinner. And usually we don't know. And then so half of those nights, it usually involves me going out to the freezer, grabbing a piece of venison or some other critter meat and popping it in a little sink full of water to defrost it, and so I can throw it on the grill. So there's a big old stack of burgers. Did I say I've been eating a lot of burgers? Yeah, I've been eating a lot of burgers. Let me see. Yeah. Yep, I think I covered all that. Okay. So now we're going on to sausage. Sausage, I would say, is more intimidating to most people. I kind of took me a while before I tried it, and then once I tried it, I'm like, wow, that was easy. Should have done that a long time ago. So similar, you grind it just like we went through for grinding for burgers. You grind it, and then for the I'll use usually pork butt as my fat additive. Pork butt's cheap basically, and it's good. It's most a lot of fat, and probably half fat or a third fat, maybe 2/3 pork. But it's inexpensive, so that works. Um, and in the ratio, different recipes will call different ratios of, usually if it's a true venison um, recipe, they'll say venison, then they'll tell you to add fat or pork, some 3-to-1 ratio maybe or something. Um, so, so I don't have a picture of the grinder attachment, but on the grinder, there's just a tube that you screw on to, so when the meat comes out, it just goes through the tube. And then you're going to have some casings. I like natural casings versus the collagen ones. They're just kind of thick and waxy, kind of just that. But the natural ones, so they're use pork. These normal size ones with pork, and then otherwise lamb ones. If you want the little breakfast link size, those would be lamb casings. But it's not hard. If you've ever filled up a water balloon, one of the long water, balloons, long ones with water, over a spigot, that's basically the same concept, right? And it just, as you're filling the casing, it just fills up and slides off. Because basically you cram the casing up over that tube, and it'll feed off as you fill it. And then you fill it, and you got this big long coil. Then you just twist to make some links, cut the links, and there you go. That's it. On the upper right, you can see that's some summer sausage I had made. It was really good. And you had to buy those casing. They're just summer sausage casings. They're kind of big. They're permeable, so if you smoke them, it gets through the meat. It's good. So. And sausage. Did I say use pork shoulder? Boston butt pork shoulders is what I use. And if you don't want to do the make sausage links, you can just grind up the meat, add your seasoning, mix it up, and then you can make patties, sausage patties, or little links. You can do hand roll like it's Play-Doh, make some sausage, hand rolled links. Or you just got sausage to add to lasagna or whatever your meat sauce and stuff like that. So what I do a lot is I'll take some ground meat, and sometimes I'll actually cook it, and then I'll package it and freeze it. That gives me a really super quick, I'll call it a meal upgrade. My wife makes a really good vegetarian chili, and so all I got to do is pull out a package of this pre-cooked meat and pop some of that in there, and it's real quick. Or meat sauce, I can make any sauce a meat sauce with one of those packages. It works out pretty good. And if you really want to get into, just get, of course, like anything, get on YouTube. You can find a lot of real simple videos. Like I said, it's not really that hard. It's just, it's one of those things, you just got to do it once, and you'll be like, oh, this isn't so hard. Once you figure out a few things. Although I will say a couple, this is one thing where having more than one person is handy. If you get someone feeding the grinder, feeding the meat into the grinder as the other person's, catching, manipulating the sausage link out the other end, that's helpful. I tend not to have help, but it's helpful. It's useful. And of course, I mean, there's regular, all kinds of sausages, right? There's brats, kielbasa, summer sausage, salami, bologna, and a million different just flavors of sausage. So if I'm going to make a big thing, I usually make 3 or 4 different flavors. Spicy Italian is one of my favorites. I got a really good maple syrup recipe. It's really good, like a breakfast sausage, really good. So anyhow, all right. Smoker. That is some big pile of kielbasa I made. So anyhow, smoker, like I said, smokers are good. You can smoke big chunks of meat or sausages, whatnot. Just use a good dry rub if you're going to cook a chunk of meat. You can cook shoulders, hams. You can do just like you're going to do like, pulled pork, barbecue, regular barbecue. You can do it with venison. I've done that. That's good. Then I've made a bunch of sausage, smoked sausage. If you're going to smoke sausage, you should consider using a cure, just to really make sure. You have to make sure if any meat like that where you're going to cook and then it'll kind of be used as already cooked meat. You really want to make sure you properly cure it, and that's temperature. You got to monitor the temperature of the meat well, and also I would use a cure in that case. And I'm not going to get into the details of that, but when you look into it, if you go to any sausage making website and there's a bunch, it'll talk you through the safety part of things, that sort of thing. If you're gonna do the good thing about the smoker is if you're gonna do the low and slow sort of thing, like the whole ham or shoulder, it breaks down a lot of the connective tissues and stuff. It's just like you do with pork. So, and that's about it. Okay, I think I covered that. Dehydrating and jerky. So if you're gonna make jerky, there's I'm kind of on the big chunks, like the Jack's Links sort of side, versus a Slim Jim. I usually make that. So I'll slice the meat again. I got this cheap little slicer, works real good at getting the sizes uniform though, and that really helped be consistent when you cook it. So you don't get a lot of, if you get little pieces that are too thin or thinner than most of it, then you'll end up with like super hard, chewy jerky. And so using that slicer's helped a lot. And then you marinate it. I use mostly soy sauce based recipes. Here you can see I got 4 different recipes going. And it's just, you can find tons of recipes, and it's just, it's a soy sauce, and then what sort of, seasonings you can add, how spicy you want it, how much, cayenne or chili powder you want to use, how much red pepper flakes, that sort of thing. That's all personal preference. So I got this big Cabela's dehydrator now. Works great. I can fit like, I don't know, close to 20 pounds of meat in there. At least 15 pounds of meat in there. The one on the little small one I had, that works well too. Again, you can use it in the oven. You can hang them on toothpicks in the oven to dehydrate jerky, or a smoker. The one thing you want to do is, particularly if you use like the bottom right, the cheap plastic one, they're not very expensive either. So, but they work well. The only thing again, a safety thing. So the jerky, right, you want it completely dried out. You want to make sure it's at a temperature high enough, which general rule, is 160 degrees for a period of time to kill all the little creepy crawlies, whatever, the trichinosis type things, right? So there's no guarantee that plastic one will get it to that temperature. So for insurance, if you're going to use that type, what I'll do is when the jerky's about ready to come out of that, I'll get the oven preheated to like 170 with a cookie tray in there, and then I'll take the meat and pop it in there for like 10 minutes just to be sure it got over 160 for a period of time, just to make sure everything's killed in there that needs to be killed. So safety first. Again, it's usually, marinate overnight, and then depending on the thickness, it could take 5 to 7 hours or something to dehydrate it, depending on how thick it is. But it's oh, and this is more of a personal behavior thing. So when I make it, I do package it and so I'll freeze it. I usually make big batches of everything. Just economy of scale. So I'll make it. You saw that big Cabela's thing packed with jerky. So I'll have a lot of small packages, and I'll try to disperse them in different places. Because what I find, as soon as I open a package of jerky, I eat the whole package. So if you want it to last, you kind of got to disperse it, spread it around, maybe get family members to hide some for you or something. But it's addicting for me anyhow. So Crockpots. Crockpot's another option. I'm not a big Crockpot person, only because again I don't plan well. So this sort of thing you had to think ahead of time before dinner, so you can just typically you can braise a chunk of something in a frying pan and then throw it in there with some veggies, some broth or whatnot, seasoning, and then you turn it on and go about your day and come back dinner time and eat it. So I will use it. It's not really common just because again I'm not a good planner. So and I'm gonna say that is a beaver leg. That is not venison. That'd be a beaver ham. So again, so the crock pot just kind of like the slow and low on the smoker and is breaks down. He cooks things that long for it breaks down all the connective tissue. So it's good for tougher meats like the shoulder with more connective tissue and that sort of thing. So other critters, I had some different pictures in here of their different things, some bear and some beaver in there. Really, we tend, in this country, we tend to eat, beef, chicken, pork, right? And there's so many different things we could all be eating for variety. So just whatever's in season, don't be afraid to throw it on the grill, taste it. So there's birds, a lot of ducks and other birds, mergansers and things, all edible. Geese, quite edible. Ducks and geese, you kind of got to think of them as dark meat, red meat. Don't think of them as chicken. Chicken you need to cook through. This meat, if you cook duck through, it'll taste like liver. I'll be honest with you. It'll taste bad. Cook it like red meat, medium rare, and you're good to go. So a lot of different options if into the bird hunting. There's a host of different birds, and they all are they show somewhere on the scale of really good to maybe not so good, and it depends on what they're eating. So there's different puddle ducks versus diver ducks, and so if they're eating crustaceans and things, they're just not going to taste as good as some others. Typically it links to what they're eating, how good they taste. That's true for a lot of things. So, see birds, changes, yeah, okay. Squirrels. Squirrels are just there. They're everywhere, and I think they're overlooked easily. I just threw these pictures in here. The interesting part about these is if you could see the time on the photos. So the top left was like about 12:04 one day. The top right was like 12:12, and the bottom right picture was like 12:20. So that squirrel, went from, one of my trees to my lunch in about 25 minutes or so, give or take. And that's when you eat fresh stuff. There's something about really fresh stuff that makes it just better. If you can eat anything the same day, it is good. Even some of those birds, mergansers aren't really supposed to taste well. but super fresh. You just cook it and don't overcook it. Just get to it quick and get it cooked up and eaten. It's good. All that's good. So let's see what else we got here. Gator. So I did have opportunity to do some gator hunting. And more interesting about this is, right, if you start Googling gator recipes, you don't find much. You really don't. Most people have ever eaten gator or eaten like gator bites, which is they'll take tail meat, put them in little cubes, bread it and fry it, right? I mean, you can bread and fry pretty much anything, and it tastes like fried breading, So, so when I got this, so I tried Googling, really didn't find anything useful. So I just said, okay, let me experiment. So usually the first time I eat something, I will eat it, try to make it really simple. I don't want to mess with the meat or the texture the meat's going to be. So on the bottom right, you can see I cut little slices off some tail. On the top right, that's chunks of the tail meat. I just cut some slices, probably put a little olive oil and salt and pepper because I wanted to taste the meat. I wanted to know what it was going to taste like because it was kind of a unique texture. It was kind of, I'll call it chicken fish. It was kind of the texture of chicken and fish, more flexible like fish, but not flaky like fish, more solid like chicken, but much more flexible like a fish. So I'll call it chicken fish. So I'm like, okay. So I just grilled up some things and it was good. It was the first time I'd eaten lizard. And it's just a big lizard. So that was good. So then I'm like, okay, then I I made some, on the other picture, you can see some breaded stuff, kind of like fish fillets or chicken cutlets sort of thing. And that was good too. And then this is where I was being a little bit creative. I think we went somewhere and my wife got some crab cakes. And so I had this crab cake thought in my head. So I'm like, oh, I'm going to go home. I'm going to try making crab cakes out of the gator meat. See how that goes. Like gator cakes. So I just chopped up some thing I just found a crab cake recipe and I made it and they were really good. Very good. After that, then I thought I should grind up some and just make some gator burgers as well. I think that would have worked well. But that's, it just be creative. You can make anything any way you want, right? So don't feel like you have to go, find a venison recipe. If you have a certain way you like beef or some other thing, it'll probably work for venison or, any other critter. So you just gotta kind of be creative a little bit, think about, but don't get hung up on it and do what you want, let me see, other critters. Yeah, sometimes you just gotta wing it, And fajitas, I didn't talk about fajitas. So fajitas, I mean, you could take any meat, cut it little strips, pieces, and, fry it up with a little seasoning and butter or something and throw it in the fajita. With some veggies. I do a lot of beaver fajitas. Spices. I mean, there's a plethora of spices. I just threw a handful of stuff up here. You can buy some pre game mix stuff. I have a couple of those there, or just a barbecue. Any barbecue seasoning works on any meat. I got some Cajun or Creole or stuff on there. I use that on some of that, of course, fish, but I use that on the gator as well. Just use what you like. My standby is salt, pepper, and garlic powder. I'll salt, pepper, and garlic powder with a little olive oil, usually to just let the seasoning meld in and melt into the meat a little bit and grill it. So be creative. Yeah, that is not my gator on the right, I tell you. I'm not sure I would have done that, but it makes a good picture. Top left, so someday, I don't know, I had deer heart and squirrels meat for dinner. I can't remember what I did. I think I fajited those. And there's some pictures of some fajitas on the bottom left there. Um, and with some homemade salsa on those. Yeah, just don't hold yourself back. Don't think, you got to conform to anything. Just do what you want. It's your meat. Useful links. The Meat Eater guys, I mean, they have a popular TV show and stuff. And basically, if you haven't seen it, he basically hunts and then cooks what he hunts. So it's good. He's got cookbooks and different other books. But they have a lot of online stuff, good, useful stuff there. AmazingRibs.com. That's my go-to for smoking and grilling and stuff like that. A lot of information on the science behind what's going on with the meat. It's more interesting. Well, I'm an engineer, so I kind of got into some of that, but that's really, really useful stuff there. Anything with the smoker, grilling and stuff. And they do make amazing ribs, the recipe there. So, places you can buy product, the processing products. LEM is one, Cabela's is the other, Walton's Inc. website. They just sell all processing stuff and sausage supplies, seasonings or casings, that sort of stuff. And Weston Brands, they also make a lot of the equipment, the grinders, vacuum sealers, different stuff. So that's about it. So, I didn't get into a lot on the recipes. Again, it's personal, and you can Google. You can, like, for sausage, you can find 7 million sausage recipes, and they all work for venison. If even if they're not made for venison, they'll work. So with that, I'm going to say is just now go fill your freezer. The first freezer picture I had was just before the season. This is deep into the season. My freezer's filling up. It's good because it needs to last me all year. So with that, we'll move on to the question and answer section.
All right, perfect. This has been amazing. So I don't know about everybody else on here, but I'm pretty hungry now. So Pat, if you want to just have us all over sometime. But yeah, we'll go straight to the chat because we've got a few questions in there. So our first question is, when you're separating the meat, do you cut with the grain or against the grain?
Oh, well, separating, if I'm separating the different muscle sections, it's all just connective tissue. You'll see each muscles are separate. But when I'm going to cut a steak, it's usually I'll cut the steak where, either way, just really, I'm going after the size of the steak slice. So you can see I cut it there, and I think that was crosswise on that one sirloin that I sliced up. But I don't get, because I'm more concerned about, because those, each muscle is only so big, so you have to figure out how you're going to get steaks out of it. So that's usually how I'm optimizing the size of that piece of meat to get what steaks I want and try to get a uniform slices. So.
All right, very good. And Timothy has a tip here. Make sure you check out the maximum temperature on a dehydrator before purchase. He bought one and it does not go up to a safe temperature, so he has to finish in the oven. So that's just a great tip when you guys are out shopping for your equipment. And the next question, any ideas, thoughts about deer kidney, liver, or other innards?
I mean, just liver and the heart usually. You saw I had one picture of the heart there. I'll try to pull the heart out. I haven't been so I usually, when I process my deer, I usually don't gut them. So I'll hang them without gutting them and just strip the meat off. So since I haven't gutted them, I haven't really had the opportunity to go for the liver. So a lot of times I've been foregoing the liver because I just don't want to. Okay, because it's one more step, and then you're going to get into the messy part. And so, but I made a kind of a commitment to myself to go after those livers this year. I haven't done the kidneys. I don't know. I never really, I don't know. Maybe I'll try the kidneys this year, but just typically the heart and the liver is what I'd go after.
Gotcha. And we've also got John here who agrees that heart is awesome. So it's great that you guys are utilizing a lot of different parts of the deer. So that's fantastic. Alexander here has a tip. You can get free beef and pork fat from Whole Foods if you call ahead and give them a couple days, depending on the amount. That's a great, fantastic tip. I'm sure they might start getting more calls about that because that is excellent. And he said, ask for the meat department. So fantastic. And if anyone else has any questions, comments, anything for Pat, feel free to unmute yourself and ask away.
Yeah. Also, I'll open things up to an offer on doing stuff with the meat. You know, I wouldn't be against doing like a little sausage demo day, right? Like I said, I'm always looking for some extra hands. So if I can kind of do a Huck Finn thing and have everybody over making sausage for me at my house, that'd be great. But if anybody's interested in that, processing or cutting up meat, contact me, and what I'll do is, next, come the season, I'll just give you a heads up when I'm going to either, if I got a deer, I'm going to process a deer, or if I'm, it's the deer's coming out of the freezer sort of thing, and I'm going to do something. So if anybody's really looking for some hands-on stuff, just reach out to me.
Looks like we've definitely got a couple takers there, and we've got another question or comment popping up real quick. Donating deer meat, do you have to do it the same time you harvest? Should you get rid of meat you have had in the freezer for over a year? So both good questions.
Repeat the first part of that on the donation part.
When donating deer meat, do you have to do it the same time you harvest?
Well, it depends. I mean, if you can freeze it or otherwise put it on ice, right? If you get like a gutted deer, and Guy and Judy they're the collectors of donated deer, so they can speak up if they'd like to add, but typically they'll take them if they're in the cooler, gutted and the quartered and put in the cooler or frozen, they'll take them. And as far as the freezer, like I said, if depends how it was, if it was vacuum sealed, I've pulled stuff out the 2 years old and it was fine. Right. And if it's not vacuum sealed, then it's probably going to be badly freezer burnt after a certain time, or, even just the freezer wrap, it only lasts so long. I don't know if that would really, you get a whole year out of the freezer wrap. You'll get some burn, maybe not too bad, but it depends how it is. But you can, if you get a little freezer burn, of course you can trim it, trim the edges, depending on what it is, and you may be able to salvage it.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah,
and
Pat, I'll go ahead and add that. I'll go ahead and add to that. This is Judy. We run the North Carolina Hunters for the Hungry Deer donation site for the Raleigh area, and so we're down here in Lillington, and so yes, it is best to go ahead and deliver deer when they are fresh for deer donation. At Harnett County here in our Lillington site, you can bring them whole. We'll take care of the gutting and whatever needs to be done for it. We'll take CWD samples, and we do fetal studies. We do all kinds of stuff there. But the reason that for deer donation to community programs, you would want to do it when it's still fresh is because North Carolina laws require that these deer be processed by a licensed processor and before it can be distributed out to a community food bank, which is basically giving it out to John Q. Public. If, though, you have meat in the freezer and would like to donate that to your community, I would highly encourage you to reach out to local churches and food pantries and see if they'll take it. It could be they have neighbors or people in need through local churches that have a need that are not quite so regulated. So I think that there's always a need for this, and I concur with Pat. We ate a meatloaf that was dated 2018 yesterday, and we're still here. So it was just one of those that got kind of stuck in the back of the freezer and we didn't realize it, but it was vacuum sealed, and I highly recommend. This is a expensive venture in terms of time and effort, as well as perhaps cost, to get this meat in your freezer. And don't waste it by packaging it poorly. Get a vacuum sealer. They're not expensive, and you won't find freezer burn. It just won't happen anymore. And unless you lose power, you've got meat that is long lasting.
Great advice. Great advice. And I'll jump in there too and just follow up on some of Judy's comments for the deer donation. So they have a site down in the Lillington area. So if you're kind of south of Raleigh, they will accept your deer donations there. Also, North Carolina Hunters for the Hungry has processors located across the state. So if you live in a different area or you happen to be hunting in a different area, you can go to nchuntersforthehungry.org and check it out. It might be .com, and check out the processor map. So there's approximately 20 places you can donate across the state. And if you're just north of Raleigh, there is a processor in Lewisburg. So feel free to take some of your harvest by these processors and help feed people locally. It's greatly appreciated. And let's see, any more questions? All right, I don't see any in the chat box, so we'll go ahead and do the wrap up for this evening, and this will be recorded, so you guys can always check back and see some of the tips that Pat had for you all tonight. So just want to say special thanks to New Hill Hunter Education and Mentoring Program and all the facilitating partners. Watch for a post-webinar email with a link for all materials related to this evening's webinar and a registration link for our next webinar in the series, which is August 24th, and it will be Hunting Strategies, a wrap-up. So the guest speaker will be Guy Gardner from the New Hill Hunter Education and Mentoring Program. So we're really looking forward to that. And if you have further questions or would like more information on outdoor opportunities, please contact the New Hill Hunter Education and Mentoring Program at the link or Facebook page provided. Also, check out ncwf.org to learn more about the Wildlife Federation and to join a local chapter. And all of these webinars from the Learn to Deer Hunt series are on the Wildlife Federation YouTube page. So you can just look up North Carolina Wildlife Federation on YouTube, and there should be a playlist compiled for those. So thank you so much for this evening's presentation, Pat, and thanks for all of you who could join us. And we look forward to seeing some of you on the 24th. So good night, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.